There's a specific psychological move Machiavelli described that makes people stop challenging you entirely, not because they fear you, but because something in their subconscious tells them you're not someone to be questioned. I've seen this technique transform constantly criticized managers into unquestioned leaders, turn overlooked employees into decision-makers nobody dares to second-guess, and help ordinary people develop an aura of authority that makes others hesitate before opposing them. You'll understand why some people seem naturally unchallenged, discover the specific mindset shift that changes everything, and learn the precise techniques that create psychological immunity from constant pushback. But here's what's fascinating. This isn't about being aggressive, intimidating, or playing political games. The move I'm about to reveal works through pure psychology. It rewires how others perceive your authority at a subconscious level. They ask for opinions when they should be stating decisions. They explain themselves too much. They telegraph uncertainty through their body language and word choices. Every one of these signals tells others, this person can be questioned. Once you understand this principle, you'll notice it everywhere among the people who seem immune to challenge and criticism. Most people invite challenges without realizing it through specific behaviors and psychological signals they send. In the next few minutes, I'm going to break down exactly how to eliminate these challenge-inviting behaviors and replace them with psychological positioning that makes people think twice before opposing you. If you're tired of having every decision questioned and every idea challenged, smash that like button right now. And make sure you subscribe with notifications on. I share advanced influence strategies regularly that most people never learn. Let's dive into why you're currently inviting challenges and how to stop it immediately. Here's the brutal truth that most people refuse to face. You're being challenged constantly because you're unconsciously inviting those challenges through specific behaviors that signal weakness. Machiavelli understood that authority isn't something you have. It's something others perceive you as having, and most people destroy that perception before they even realize they had it. Every time you ask, "What do you think?" when you should be stating a decision, every time you over-explain your reasoning, every time you apologize for having an opinion, you're sending a psychological signal that screams, "I'm not sure about this. Please challenge me." The fatal flaw is this. You're seeking validation instead of projecting certainty. Watch what happens in your next meeting or family discussion. When you over-explain, you're communicating that your decision needs their understanding to be valid. They don't explain every detail of their reasoning. They state their conclusion and move forward. They don't apologize for having preferences or standards. This isn't arrogance, it's psychological positioning that eliminates the space for challenges to emerge. When you apologize for your choices, you're telling people that your judgment is questionable. People don't challenge those who project unshakable confidence in their decisions. They challenge those who seem to be asking for permission to have those decisions in the first place. But here's the deeper insight. People unconsciously test your intelligence and authority through challenges. If you respond to those tests by seeking their approval or justifying yourself extensively, you fail the test. Most people think authority comes from being right, being smart, or being fair. The more they challenge you, the more uncertain you become about your own judgment. The more uncertain you become, the more you seek validation. Meanwhile, people who project certainty, regardless of whether they are actually more qualified, face fewer challenges because they've conditioned others to accept their authority. But Machiavelli understood that authority comes from being perceived as someone who does not need others' permission to act. When you constantly seek validation, you're training people to see you as someone whose decisions require their approval. If you respond with calm certainty, they stop testing. Someone presents an idea tentatively. "I was thinking maybe we could try this approach, but I don't know. What does everyone think?" Immediately, 3 people jump in with objections. Later, someone else states firmly, "We're implementing this strategy starting Monday." Nobody questions it. Same room, same people, completely different response. The difference isn't the quality of the ideas, it's the psychological positioning of the person presenting them. Machiavelli wrote that, "The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him." The challenge-inviting behaviors show up everywhere in your communication. You end statements with upward inflection, turning declarations into questions. You use qualifying language like "I think maybe," or "it might be good if," instead of direct statements. You immediately explain your reasoning before anyone asks for it, which signals that you expect to be questioned. You ask for input on decisions you should be making independently. Here's what's happening psychologically. When you project uncertainty, you're literally inviting others to fill that uncertainty with their opinions. Think about the most unchallenged person in your workplace or social circle. They don't ask permission. They inform people of decisions. The fatal flaw goes deeper than just communication patterns. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of how authority works. This creates a vicious cycle. The more you invite challenges by seeking validation, the more people challenge you. Breaking this cycle requires recognizing that your need for validation is exactly what's preventing you from getting the respect you want. Here's Machiavelli's secret weapon for becoming psychologically untouchable. You must master the art of decisive communication that eliminates doubt before it can form in others' minds. This isn't about being rigid or authoritarian. It's about communicating with such clarity and conviction that challenging you feels unnecessary and uncomfortable. Machiavelli observed that the most effective leaders shared one crucial trait. They spoke as if their decisions were already reality, not proposals up for debate. First, elimination of choice language. Instead of saying, "I think we should consider maybe trying this approach," you say, "We're implementing this strategy. I know it might be inconvenient, but what do you think?" Untouchable approach. We're moving our weekly meetings to Tuesday mornings starting next week. What people see in your communication style tells them more about your authority than your actual qualifications. When they see hesitation, they challenge. When they see conviction, they comply. You eliminate questions that aren't actually questions. "Should we start the meeting?" becomes, "Let's begin." You remove softening language that weakens your position. "I just wanted to mention," becomes, "I need to address." You stop using tentative scheduling. "Maybe we could meet sometime next week," becomes, "I'll see you Thursday at 2 p.m. This is why someone with less experience can command more respect than someone with superior credentials. It's all about psychological positioning. You state timelines instead of suggesting them. You assign tasks instead of asking if people can handle them. You announce decisions instead of floating ideas. Each of these shifts eliminates the psychological invitation for others to challenge your authority. I'll send the calendar updates this afternoon. Same request, completely different psychological impact. They don't feel the need to challenge because you haven't signaled that their input is required. It's about establishing the psychological framework where you control when input is requested, rather than having it constantly volunteered. You can always ask for perspectives when you actually want them. "I'd like your thoughts on the implementation timeline." But you ask from a position of authority rather than uncertainty. When you communicate tentatively, you're conditioning others to see you as someone still figuring things out, which naturally invites their suggestions and opposition. Second, removal of justification gaps. You don't explain why unless specifically asked because unsolicited explanations signal uncertainty. Third, confident assumption of compliance. When you eliminate uncertainty from your communication, you eliminate the psychological space where challenges grow. Instead of people feeling free to challenge everything you say, they start waiting for you to indicate when their input is welcome. Instead of treating your statements as opening arguments in a debate, they treat them as information to process and act upon. The result is that you face dramatically fewer challenges because you've eliminated the psychological triggers that invite them. People challenge unclear directions and tentative suggestions. They rarely challenge clear, confident decisions from someone who seems certain of their authority. You speak as if cooperation is expected, not requested. They understood that the moment you present something as questionable, people will question it. The moment you present something as decided, people accept it and move forward. The untouchable leader method works through 3 psychological principles. Watch how this transforms typical workplace interactions. Normal approach. "Hey everyone, I was thinking maybe we could look at changing our meeting schedule." The power here isn't in being inflexible. It's in projecting certainty that makes others comfortable following your lead. Machiavelli wrote that, "Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand." The untouchable method requires changing specific language patterns that invite opposition. This extends beyond just word choice into your entire communication framework. Here's what's happening beneath the surface. When you communicate with certainty, you're conditioning others to see you as someone who has thought through the situation and reached a conclusion. The untouchable leader method isn't about being unreasonable or ignoring good input. This creates a powerful shift in group dynamics. Here's the move that separates people who get challenged from people who get deferred to. You must establish psychological dominance through strategic positioning that makes others instinctively view you as the authority in the room. This isn't about intimidation or aggression. It's about occupying psychological space in a way that makes challenging you feel unnatural. Machiavelli understood that true power comes from others' perception of your position, not from your actual title or credentials. The person who commands the room is not necessarily the highest-ranking person. It's the person who has positioned themselves psychologically as the decision-maker that others naturally look to for direction. Psychological dominance positioning works through three strategic elements. First, you claim conversational territory by being the first to frame discussions and set agendas. Second, you establish expertise territory by speaking with authority on subjects within your domain, without seeking validation. But in professional and social contexts, the equivalent isn't fear. It's the psychological weight that makes people think twice before opposing you. You don't fidget or engage in nervous movements that signal uncertainty. You maintain steady eye contact when speaking and listening. You use deliberate gestures that emphasize your points rather than random movements that dissipate your energy. They start assuming you'll handle complex situations because you've demonstrated capability in handling them before. They stop questioning your judgment because you've proven your judgment reliable. Instead of getting defensive or immediately explaining yourself, you pause. Consider the challenge calmly and respond from a position of authority. I understand your concern. Here's why we're proceeding this way. You acknowledge without apologizing, explain without justifying, and maintain your position without appearing rigid. They begin deferring to your expertise because you've established yourself as the expert they can trust. People start challenging you less, not because they're afraid of you, but because challenging someone who seems so certain of their position feels awkward and unnecessary. They begin to assume you've already considered the angles they might raise, so they don't feel compelled to raise them. These physical elements reinforce the psychological message that you're someone to be taken seriously. This comes from consistently demonstrating that you occupy the authority position in interactions. You take charge of logistics, timelines, and outcomes. When problems arise, you're the one proposing solutions. When decisions need to be made, you're the one making them or facilitating the decision-making process. You become the person others naturally look to for direction because you've consistently occupied that role. When someone asks a question in your area of knowledge, you don't hedge your answer with uncertainty markers. Instead of, "I think the data probably shows," you say, "The data shows." Instead of, "I'm not totally sure, but I believe," you say, "Based on my analysis." You present information as facts when you know them to be true, not as opinions seeking confirmation. It's about being the most centered, most prepared, and most decisive person. It's about occupying the psychological space of someone who has things under control while others are still figuring out what's happening. When entering a meeting, instead of finding an empty chair and blending in, you position yourself where you can see everyone and everyone can see you. You arrive prepared with a clear agenda, even if it's informal. You begin conversations by setting context. Here's what we need to accomplish today. You speak first on key topics, establishing the framework others will respond to rather than responding to frameworks others create. Third, you occupy physical and social territory by taking up appropriate space and maintaining composure under pressure. Here's how this plays out in real situations. The dominance positioning extends to how you handle information and expertise. Machiavelli wrote that, "Since love and fear can hardly exist together, if we must choose between them, it is far safer to be feared than loved." Physical positioning matters more than most people realize. You don't lean back passively, you lean forward when making important points. The key is understanding that dominance positioning isn't about dominating others, it's about dominating the situation. This positioning creates a psychological expectation in others. Here's what most people miss. Psychological dominance isn't about being the loudest or most aggressive person in the room. The dominance positioning also requires controlling your reactions to challenges when they do occur. When you consistently occupy the authority position through strategic psychological positioning, something powerful happens. Here's the counterintuitive truth that destroys most people's authority. The more you explain your decisions, the more people feel entitled to challenge them. Machiavelli discovered that justification is the enemy of authority because it transforms decisions into debates and turns you from a leader into a defendant in your own courtroom. You're inviting them to evaluate your logic, find flaws in your thinking, and offer alternative approaches. What you think is being transparent and collaborative is actually being weak and uncertain. Every time you over-explain your reasoning, you're unconsciously communicating that your decision requires others' intellectual approval to be valid. When you justify extensively, you're treating your own decisions as hypotheses that need others' validation. If someone needs to understand your reasoning to execute their part effectively, you give them that information. Justifying response. Well, I thought about Monday, but people are usually overwhelmed at the start of the week, and Tuesday through Thursday seemed too busy with other meetings. And I wanted to give everyone enough time to prepare, so Friday seemed like the best option, although I know it's not ideal. Authority response. Friday gives us the preparation time we need and fits our overall timeline. You don't explain your reasoning before anyone asks for it. You don't apologize for having preferences or standards. You don't walk people through your decision-making process unless it's genuinely necessary for implementation. You present conclusions and move forward. Instead of seeing your choices as starting points for negotiation, they begin seeing them as endpoints that define the direction everyone will move. They rarely challenge decisions that are presented with quiet confidence and minimal defensive explanation. Your authority becomes self-reinforcing because people begin assuming your decisions are well considered, rather than questioning whether they are. Instead of feeling invited to debate your judgment, they focus on understanding their role in implementation. If someone is simply questioning your judgment, you don't feed their challenge by defending every aspect of your thought process. When you walk someone through every consideration that led to your decision, you're implying that they need to agree with your reasoning for your decision to be valid. When you state your decision with confident brevity, you're implying that your judgment is sufficient and their agreement isn't required. When you state decisions with minimal explanation, you're treating them as facts that others need to understand and implement. Commands don't come with lengthy explanations of why they're necessary. They come with enough context for execution and the assumption that the person giving them has the authority to make that judgment. This is the foundation of all respected leadership. You pause, consider whether their challenge reveals something you missed, and respond appropriately. If their concern is valid, you acknowledge it and adjust if necessary. If their concern isn't valid, you acknowledge their perspective and maintain your position without extensive justification. Watch this dynamic in action. Someone asks why you made a particular choice. Your instinct is to walk them through your entire thought process. Well, I considered option A. There's a crucial difference. Information moves things forward. We're implementing this approach because it addresses our three main challenges. Justification invites debate. I chose this approach after considering many options, and while it's not perfect, I think it's probably our best bet given the circumstances. But then I realized it had these problems, and option B seemed better because of these factors, although I'm still not totally sure about the timeline. You just gave them a roadmap for dismantling your decision. Now they know every doubt you had, every alternative you considered, and every weak point in your reasoning. Machiavelli understood that effective leaders provide information, not justification. The never justify principle works because it maintains the psychological framework that your decisions are conclusions, not proposals. This doesn't mean being secretive or unreasonable. It means understanding the difference between providing necessary context and seeking intellectual approval. Here's how this transforms typical interactions. Challenge. Why did you decide to schedule a presentation for Friday? The psychological principle here is that extensive justification signals uncertainty about your own judgment. Machiavelli wrote that, "He who wishes to be obeyed must know how to command." The never justify approach requires breaking the habit of preemptive explanation. When someone does challenge your decision, you don't automatically launch into a detailed defense. This creates a powerful shift in how others interact with your decisions. The result is that challenges become rare because you've eliminated the psychological invitation that creates them. People challenge decisions that seem uncertain or poorly considered. Here's Machiavelli's ultimate authority system that makes you permanently challenge-proof. You must create consistent consequences for those who challenge your judgment inappropriately, while rewarding those who respect your authority. This is not about punishment or manipulation. It's about conditioning others to understand that challenging you comes with a cost while respecting you comes with benefits. But the deeper insight is that people respond to patterns of consequences. Second, you make respecting your authority convenient and rewarding. Third, you remain completely consistent in applying these consequences so people learn the pattern quickly and reliably. You give them access to information and opportunities. You include them in planning discussions. People who consistently challenge your judgment get less advance notice of decisions, fewer opportunities to provide input, and reduced access to your time and attention. The person who allows their decisions to be constantly challenged without consequence will find their authority eroded completely. The person who consistently demonstrates that challenging them is costly, while respecting them is beneficial, will find their authority strengthened over time. You don't make decisions impulsively that you'll need to reverse later. You don't change direction without clear reasoning. You don't undermine your own authority by constantly second-guessing yourself publicly. You maintain the standard that makes your authority worth respecting. They start respecting your authority because they've seen the advantages it provides. People who respect your authority get earlier involvement, more information, and greater influence over outcomes. This isn't vindictive, it's strategic resource allocation. People know that if they have genuine concerns, they can express them respectfully and be heard. They also know that casual challenges and undermining behavior will cost them opportunities and access. This makes them much more thoughtful about when and how they question your decisions. You stop including them in decisions, stop providing them with opportunities, and stop investing your energy in their success. This isn't cruelty. It's recognition that some people are incompatible with your leadership style, and continuing to engage with them weakens your authority with everyone else. Not through force or manipulation, but through consistent demonstration that respecting your authority benefits everyone, while challenging it benefits no one. Tell me in the comments because I want to know which of these transformations you're committed to making. Smash that like button if you're ready to stop being challenged and start being respected automatically. And subscribe with notifications on, because I regularly share advanced authority strategies that most people never discover. Remember, authority isn't given to you by others. It's taken by you through strategic action. Now go make yourself challenge-proof. People learn to work with your leadership rather than against it because you've made that the obviously superior choice. You don't punish people for disagreeing with you. You create natural consequences for how they express that disagreement. Respectful questions and genuine concerns get thoughtful responses. Knee-jerk challenges and undermining behavior get professional but firm boundaries. You teach people how to interact with your authority through consistent response patterns. You create a clear pattern where working with your authority leads to advancement and recognition. When challenging your authority consistently leads to negative outcomes for them, they stop challenging. When someone challenges your decision inappropriately, instead of engaging in debate, you make them responsible for providing a complete alternative solution. People observe that those who work well with you get better opportunities, more information, and greater success. They notice that those who constantly challenge you end up marginalized and excluded. They learn to choose their challenges carefully and express disagreement respectfully. I understand you disagree with this approach. Put together a full proposal with timeline and resource requirements, and we'll review it next week. The permanent system works through three interconnected principles. First, you make challenging you inconvenient and unrewarding. Here's how this manifests in real situations. When someone respects your authority and executes your decisions effectively, you acknowledge their contribution publicly. The consequence system extends to how you handle information and access. Machiavelli understood that authority must be maintained through action, not just position. The key is never making the system personal or emotional. This system also requires you to be absolutely reliable in your own authority. When someone persists in challenging your authority despite consistent consequences, you escalate to the ultimate response. You remove their access to the benefits of your leadership entirely. The permanent system creates a powerful social dynamic where respecting your authority becomes the obviously smart choice. This is how Machiavelli's principles create permanent authority that can't be challenged. If these 5 strategies have shown you exactly why you've been facing constant challenges and how to eliminate them permanently, I need you to take action right now.